Hi, Joanna. How are you today? Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So, can you share with our viewers a little bit about Athlete Ally and the work that you all are doing to stand up for trans athletes?
Sure. So at Athlete Ally, we believe that everyone should have equal access and opportunity in sports. The reason we believe that is because so many of us have had our own lives touched by sport. We know the many benefits that sport can bring to our mental and physical health, and also, especially for young people, the lifelong lessons that sports can teach around teamwork and leadership. We feel like access to sport is just life saving. And it is heartbreaking to know that in almost half of the country, states are banning transgender kids from being able to play the sports that they love. So often, these bans are based on misinformation, on uh, harmful stereotypes. And so, a huge part of our work is working to dispel those stereotypes, working to educate the public and show them that trans kids are kids, just like any other child. They want to play sports with their friends. They deserve to be fully who they are in all parts of their life. And they deserve to not just survive, but be able to be happy and to find joy wherever they can.
And that's a good transition. Like you said, many states are restricting and even sometimes banning trans athletes from participating in sports. You kind of spoke to a little bit, but what are you all seeing across the country right now when it comes to those attacks? How are these athletes handling it?
Well, we know from studies from the Trevor Project that trans youth are seriously impacted by this kind of legislation. Even just waking up in the morning and seeing headlines that demonize and dehumanize them, that has a real impact on kids. And I think, in addition to the different benefits that I just talked about that sports brings, I'm thinking about really the inverse of that. So the ways that kids now aren't having access to these healthy ways of releasing stress, of releasing anxiety, of making friends. It's also coming down to a very fundamental principle, which is that trans people deserve to exist. They deserve to be public. They deserve to be visible, and they can't simply be who they are from, let's say 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., but then shut it off from 2 to 3 p.m. when they go to gym class or when they go to play sports. We are who we are in all parts of our lives, and in all parts of our lives, we deserve to be able to participate free from discrimination.
And your organization is doing some really great work. You all have the Principal Six campaign, and you're also working with the NCAA on different policies and resources for LGBTQ plus athletes. Can you tell us a little bit about those efforts that you all currently have in play, and kind of a little bit the impact that it's had on the athletic atmosphere?
Sure. So part of that involves working directly with student athletes, which is an aspect of our work that we're really excited about because we know student athletes are experiencing these kinds of policy attacks firsthand in their campuses, on their campuses, in their communities. And also, they're the ones who are really at the forefront of making change. And so we work with them in a number of different ways. We have campus chapters across the country where we provide student athletes with tools and education on how they can organize pride nights, how they can organize educational panels, and speak to members of their own team, of different athletic teams across their campus to really educate folks and start those conversations on what an inclusive team looks like. What does it look like to show up for your teammates who may, want to come out but aren't sure if it's safe? What are ways to share your own story in a way that will inspire others? Another way that we work to drive inclusion on college campuses is through what we call the Athletic Equality Index, which is a ranking and reporting of LGBTQ inclusive policies and programs at NCAA athletic departments across the country. So anyone, current students, alumni, can go to aei.athleteally.org and look up your school score and see exactly how your school is measuring up. And if your school is doing great and has close to a 100, that's something to celebrate, and we encourage you to do that. We provide tools for you to shout that out on social media. Or if your school is not showing up in the ways that it should be, that's important for you to know too, because your voice is important to your school. or to your alma mater, and you can post on social media. You can reach out to them directly and say, hey, I know we can do better, and let me help you do better on this.
When it comes to, different levels of athletes, what change needs to happen to start to end or tackle at least homophobia and transphobia in sports? What are those first steps?
I think education is a really important first step because I think many people, especially in athletic communities, sport traditionally has been really entrenched in sexism, in these rigid gender roles, in really outdated notions around homophobia and transphobia. And so people tend to throw around homophobic slurs, but will then say, oh, but I'm not homophobic. I'm just saying this because that's what my teammates say, or it's just words. It doesn't mean anything. But what we found and what research has found as well is that that kind of homophobic language and behavior really does impact athletes. It sends a message to athletes, to coaches, to fans that it's not a safe space for them to come out. And learning how to be really intentional with your language goes a long way. So part of our work is providing that kind of education to student athletes, to coaches, to administrators on how they can be fostering inclusivity. It can be as simple as avoiding gendered language when talking to players, to being proactive about using pronouns, to working to understand better the actual lived experiences of LGBTQ athletes so that allies can be showing up for their teammates in ways that really help move the needle forward.
And as we know, we're like you said, we're seeing more and more athletes, we're seeing coaches, we're seeing everyone come out as more and more as queer, but there seems to be more work left to do. Are we headed in the right direction? Do you think so?
I believe we are, and I think we definitely have our set of challenges. 2023 has already seen a record breaking number of anti LGBTQ legislation here in the US. We've seen at least 450 bills introduced in state legislatures targeting the LGBTQ community. Of those bills, more than 350 are specifically targeting the transgender community. And that marks this past year, 2023, as the fourth consecutive year with a record breaking number of anti transgender bills. Those numbers are staggering and they're heartbreaking. And they also come at a time when we see record breaking numbers of violence against trans folks and specifically against Black trans women. And it's important to keep in mind that, the harmful rhetoric that has been circulating, especially in the right-wing media, around trans athletes and specifically around trans women is dangerous. It causes violence. It causes real life implications on the safety of trans people. At the same time, I do have hope. And the reason I have hope is that we see more athletes speaking out than ever before in support of trans athletes. We have athletes like Megan Rapinoe, like Candace Parker, Brianna Turner, who are using their incredible platforms to write op-eds in support of trans athletes, to sign on to amicus briefs, to speak out on their social media, to testify in front of state legislatures, to do whatever they can to get the message out there that not only do they not see trans girls and women as a threat to women's sports, but that they welcome them as their teammates. And something I just want to add there that we're seeing over and over again is elite women in sports really standing up against this false narrative of, that including trans girls and women is somehow a threat to girls and women's sports. We know what the actual threats are to girls and women's in sports. We even saw some of those threats playing out very recently in the Women's World Cup. And that is sexual violence. That's a lack of females in leadership positions. It's a lack of equal pay, a lack of resources for girls and women's teams. Those are actual real threats to girls and women's sports. Trans girls and women are nowhere on that list, and we're seeing more and more athletes speak out to echo that point.
And before we go, I'd love to end on a very positive note. Is there any particular success story that your organization has been a part of that has kind of stuck with you this whole time?
That's a great question. I think, for us, the Principal 6 campaign that you mentioned at the beginning is a really great example for us of the ways that organizations can come together to push for social change.